Tiger Woods' swing has changed dramatically over the years, primarily due to injury, but he's also changed it due to switching coaches. So we've got his 2023 swing on the left, 2000 swing on the right. So set up actually pretty similar. You've got similar amounts of knee bend, similar amounts of tilt of the thorax, very, very similar at address. Grip's pretty similar, very similar at address. So that's about it though. So let's take the 2023 swing back to the takeaway. So let's have a look here. This is where we'll see a lot of changes. So if we look at 2000, you'll see that the hands work more out this way. The shaft is still outside of his hands, but in 2023 you'll notice his hands work more on a straight line back. There you go. The shaft is still out, which is very similar to 2000, but you can see on 2000 those hands have just moved way more outside than what it is in 2023. And the other thing we'll note is that those hips have moved a little bit more back, more rotation through those hips. That's just due to the back surgeries, and he just can't rotate like he did as a 24-year-old in 2000. So big change there. You can see how his hands are more under the shoulder, whereas here they're more out. I know it's a slightly different camera angle, but you can quite clearly see when you see Tiger that his swing is much more around him. Look at the difference. Look at the distance between his hips there in 2023 and 2000. So big difference there. As we move it back, he's similar in terms of the amount of wrist set. He gets a little bit of bump to the right side as we see in 2000. Now the big difference there, because of the position in, okay, I'm at the same point, because of the difference in the takeaway, you'll see how his hands are much more to the left hand side of his body, whereas here they're much more in the middle of his chest. So big change there. You'll also see, look how you can see much more of his belt buckle because those hips have rotated more. As we take him up to the top, you'll see a much flatter arm plane. So you'll see his arms are much more sort of level with his shoulder plane at the top, whereas in 2000, get rid of those lines for us, you'll see it gets up to the top. Very different position. He's got probably less hip turn. He's got definitely more shoulder turn, and the position of the hands are very different, much higher hands. Club face is a little bit more short. If we look on here, probably a little bit more open. And then we'll have a look at some other differences. One being that right arm position. You can see in 2000 that right arm is a little bit more tucked, whereas in 2023 that right arm is a little bit more out. You can see in 2000 he's got a lot more width than 2023, primarily due to his injuries. He's had loads of back surgery, that ankle's fused, he just can't rotate as much, which drastically changes that top of the backswing position. You'll also note just by the position of the club how much longer the swing is in 2000. Very different, but that's just due to the injuries and his age. What we will notice though, quite similar, is look, he still manages that little squat sit down that Tiger had in 2000. You see that? He still maintained that, admittedly probably with less athleticism and less speed than 2000, again due to the injuries and age. Do you know he's nearly 50 now? So let's bring him down a couple of frames. Usually, because, let's bring him down, there we go. You'll see that again, because of that arm position, those hands being higher, those hands are a little bit more in front of him than 2023. The hands are a little bit more behind him. That right elbow is a little bit more behind. You'll see how he's got more flex in his right knee especially. Again, due to that issue around his trail ankle being fused, you can see how he's a little bit more up on the heel in 2000 just because he can push off the ground more with that right foot. So we'll bring him a few more frames down. Let's see the differences. So let's get him lead arm to parallel to the ground. You can see how the shaft's a little bit flatter. He's a little bit more rotated through those hips. You can see how you can see more of that right right butt cheek, whereas in 2023 his hips are more level, just again because he's got that fused spine. He's just not able to create this association between the upper and the lower body, so there's less of a hip drive. You can also see how there's less of a knee drive through that right knee, and there's less again of pushing through that right foot. Bring him a couple more frames down, try and get him at the same point, and again you'll see some very different moves here. You'll see that right foot again is a little bit more down. That right knee is less driving forward just because he's not got that ability and that mobility in that trail foot. You see how that right knee is really driving towards the ball. He's actually probably a little bit more closed in 2000 than he is in 2023. Maybe just because I can't quite get the frame, so I'm not confident in saying that is actually the case, but you could say that. But you can see here, very, very different. I mean, we'll try and put him just post-impact. You can see how much of a difference there is there. He's a lot more drive up through that trail foot. Tiger's very right-sided. Look on 2000, how much you can see of his rear end, whereas in 2023 you can't see as much. He's really driving off that right side. And then let's bring him a couple more frames. You'll really see the difference here, how much further he exits left in 2023, whereas in 2000 he's much more down the line with that release. Look at the difference in that foot position. Look how that right knee is pretty much touching with the left. You can see again the butt there, and you can see how far extended those arms are. Very, very different. Very much a 24-year-old swing on the right. And then we'll bring it up. You're going to see a big difference here again. So similar position, you can see how much more those hands have exited above the left shoulder, whereas those hands are exiting left of the left shoulder. You can see the difference in that foot position, how much more planted it is, and how much more he's jumped up off the ground and created that push off the right side in 2000. We'll bring him up a couple more frames, and again you'll see how much more it's around the body. That left arm is more out rather than here, it's more up above his shoulder. You can see that foot position, bring him up to a similar position. Again, look at the difference in the width there between those two positions in the hands, how much higher they are from the shoulders than in 2023. And you can see how much more side bend he's got through 2000. He can't physically side bend as much with that fused back, so he's a little bit more upright. That knee is a little bit more sort of flexed, and that foot's just, it's almost cemented in place because it's fused, whereas there is a lot more mobility through that trail ankle in 2000. Bring him up to the top of the finish of the swing, and you can see there much more gap between the arms in 2023, much more upright position of his body just because of that fused spine. Bring him up to the finish. You'll see how bolt upright Tiger is in 2023 as opposed here. You'd see a lot more curve through the spine. He's just not got the mobility now to do that, and you can just see how much more he's pushed up and how much more he's rotated with that club than in 2023. You can see the club's more facing at the ball, whereas in 2000 it's facing down the target line. Very, very different swings, but considering he's had about 20 surgeries, this 2023 swing is very, very good. It's just not going to be as powerful as the 2000 swing where he was free from injury, a lot more width, a lot more drive, but this 2023 swing is still good enough to win on the PGA Tour.